Okay, I have brought up this story a couple of times. I don't know if you've been avoiding it because I've been posting.
I have, yeah.
You've been avoiding it. I've been posting stuff in because I always get. I don't know what it is. I am drawn to demographics and just humans on planet Earth is interesting to me, just immediately, and particularly the expansion or the newer conversation around the contraction of human populations on Earth. And the story in China seems to be kind of like a focal point of this conversation. Mm-hmm. And like, what is what's the consequence of these things? Now, in China, obviously, you had one-child policy for a long period of time, and you had to imagine that there would eventually be some sort of consequence to this. This is a gigantic human experiment. This idea that, okay, we need to slow things down right now. Maybe we'll kick it back into gear if need be at a later date. Well, it turns out the whole kicking it back into gear part, not that simple. And now you're having these enormous demographic shifts and aging populations. And then what are the consequences of the economic consequences is what most people are focused on, because they say, well, all right, you have most of the workforce moving into an elderly stage. You have an entire population of one-child policy where now you have individuals responsible for their elders, and except they're solely responsible as the single person. So now you have one person working to support two. Mm-hmm. If there would have been a sibling, they could have split it up. But now it's the responsibility has rested on the shoulders in many cases of this one child. You also have a maturing of the labor force, right? So you have an increased cost associated with this labor force maturity as people have worked there longer, as they've gotten bigger wages associated with that. And we've seen and talked about how companies like Apple have looked to diversify the places in which manufacturing is being done as a potential consequence, and not just what's been going on 2019, 2020, 2021, lockdowns and so forth, but maybe also the cost of labor. You go to other markets where there's more of an abundance of human beings in a particular age bracket, like they've done with India and so forth. And eventually what you have is a power shift that takes place where those workforces exist, where that labor exists, and where you have expansion of population as opposed to contraction of population. Mm-hmm. Wow. It is just intimately intertwined with our well-being, and this idea that economics and our entire track record with it is intimately related to our own expansion. You see what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
And this is the first time in a long time that we're looking at these mega places and saying, and if it's not we're saying uh-oh, because there are so many technologies that the world now relies on that come from one place. And by the way, other places, not China, have already been relying on immigration for an extremely long time in order to boost the population in their own areas, and in order to make those necessary demographic shifts so you don't have this imbalance or upside down pyramid take place. And a lot of people, whenever we talk about these demographic topics, you'll have people saying, good, humans are ruining everything anyway, whatever. But that's maybe an oversimplification of things. I mean, I really don't even know what that mindset is moving towards. Like, if we have evidence now that it's incredibly difficult to turn around demographic changes, like one-child policy, things like this, cultural changes. Typically what happens, countries start to do well and then reproduction goes down. Mm-hmm. And that's not exclusive to China. This happens in almost all regions. And believe it or not, it's beginning to start to happen in India as well, where, population growth seemed like it was going to go on forever. It seems to be like some sort of self-regulating force. But when we talk about these, when we have this conversation, the part that I think people don't realize is how quickly it can all happen within generations. Like, for those that are saying, well, this reset will save the environment or something along these lines, the environmental scale is so much larger than human scale. Like, that's the beginning of everything. Humans, I think we all know, or at least we can probably project, will not be a thing that is there forever, most likely. And it's like this bizarre race of demographics versus environment, and this strange balancing act that has to happen between those two forces, because the advantages of our growth are pretty obvious. The low cost of goods, the ability for mass production of food, and the ability for giant populations to exist. It's all been a consequence of scale. You flip things backwards and everything gets a little bit squirrely. You start working in reverse. You start thinking about investments that people make, or the real estate costs and vacancies and so forth. And I know it seems all very crazy in a time like this, because everyone's sitting there saying, well, everything is already so expensive and so forth. But let me tell you something. When people in China were living some sort of rural lifestyle and the average woman had 6 offspring, they weren't competing with the types of costs that people are competing with now. It's not, it's more of a comparative analysis than it is just the cost of things in general. It's more saying, well, I want to have what everybody else has. And so I'm going to forego, having this family in order to keep up with whatever that criteria happens to be. Because those same people probably had less resources, and the globe seems to be indicative of this. Where there are less resources, there are more people. It's very bizarre. It's a conundrum of sorts. Where there are more resources per person, per capita, there are fewer people. Anyway, this is the first time, and it's a big topic of conversation right now. It is the first time in a long time that China's population has effectively shrunk. And so I think that's why it's an interesting topic right now. I don't know if the actual figure is there, but I mean, we have a chart so we can see the fertility rate, plummeting. And the Chinese population is expected to shrink. Look at this long term. Scroll up a little bit. Expected to shrink by 45% according to the United Nations. It is just wild how you have this massive cultural shift. And by the way, they're trying to incentivize people to. No.
It's the opposite.
Everyone's like, no. They're like, enough social experimentation. We're good. We're good here.
Well, we have something to learn from this, I guess.
Well, I don't know if it. I don't know that, like, the genie's out of the bottle, right? Like, once you have people with a brand new criteria of what a life lived looks like, a brand new criteria which doesn't involve reproduction, right? Like, where and how is that? You can't. I don't know. I don't know that any group has effectively reversed it. It's not just China, South Korea, whatever. You can look around, because I find this stuff interesting. I tend to look into it. This is a common thing that occurs. It's just that we didn't see it in these massive population groups and in places that are so critical to global well-being. Like, the global consequences can't be understated by that workforce aging and no longer being available to essentially work for the world. It's a cat and mouse game. You go chase the next population. That population gets rich, does well, as they should, and then you run out of that one because they're like, I'm not building anymore, or I'm too old to do so. It's very complex stuff. Anyway, there's so many good articles about this right now. If you're curious, you will not have to search very far. This one is from Fortune, but I've read like 10 at this point because I am interested in it, and I'm sure we'll follow up with whatever impacts this has. I know I went over.
This is a
time.
heavy topic.
It's not heavy. I mean, I guess it's heavy.
Or it's a lot to unpack.
It's heavy, but it's not necessary. I think it's a thing that people should have awareness of, right? Because it can creep up, and I think there should be some degree of awareness of when it comes to planning or
infrastructure,
everything. It's like
economy,
and a lot of people that watch this show live in places that are seen as desirable for immigration. So you're able to sort of put off that analysis or recognition. You just open the doors and you go, look, we're young again.
Yeah.
Right? For now. But eventually, as this thing moves across the globe, you can no longer open the door and have a steady supply. And if you're in a place like China, it hasn't had that same demand from people looking to immigrate there, if you understand what I'm saying. The type of jobs and things like this.
Yeah.
For now, to a point. So very interesting. I can't be the only one. Other people must find this interesting. I'd be curious to see what other people think about it, but it could be a natural thing. It could be a reset, as people suggest. There could be unexpected benefits from such things, but it's hard to really do all the math since it is such a mega thing. And I think it seems pretty obvious. If we don't make more people, there are no more people. It seems like obvious math at some point.
Well, we got Boston Dynamic spot robots.
Well, I know, but that's what I'm saying. So do we just leave the world to them? Is that how that goes?
Maybe.
We just say, okay, that's enough.
And we have Bezos. We have one Bezos.
Yeah, well, there's going to be people. It's like there's still newspapers out there. Yeah. It's just not as significant as they once were. But I think a lot of people look at this thing and they really don't like people. They're like, enough of us anyway.
Yeah, there's too many.
Enough of us anyway. But that's
on the other side.
But that's a weird way to walk around the world, right? Like, then what are you doing? What are you doing then? From day to day, how do you get up in the morning with such a sense of blah? Too many people. I'm sick of people. Enough already. You're ruining everything. It's like, I don't know. That's a tough one to manage. I think there's always going to be a degree of that, but you're really trying to balance it with, hey, these people are pretty cool. They figured out something cool. They're not bad. I just talked to them. I swear they're not bad. Go check them out. It's actually kind of fun. People are pretty cool. Maybe people are one of the coolest things. That in the entire universe, maybe people are one of the coolest things. It's possible, isn't it? We could also be one of the worst things. But this is the point. You get to wake up in the morning and you can kind of pick your poison. You can kind of pick your side. And I'll be honest. Even for me, it changed from day to day.
Yeah,
changed from day to day. Fluctuates.
So I don't know where to go after this. Maybe we can take a break. You want to take a break? No, because the next story is just going to be like something completely different.